No matter where you are in your career, one of the most important tools you can use to land technical interviews and get hired is your technical resume. With all the conflicting advice on how to format a resume, what to include in one, and things to avoid, it can be a real challenge to determine what you should include in order to stand out. My name is Timur Meyster. I'm a coding bootcamp graduate who went through my first job search in 2015 to become a software engineer. I faced a ton of rejection getting my first software engineering job, and I can tell you that no matter how good you are, your resume will help open a ton of doors for you. That's why I'm making this video to be your ultimate guide to technical resumes. I'll show you all of the information, including templates, and I'll provide tips that you can use in order to create your first technical resume. This resume is going to help you get a job and get interviews no matter what background you're coming from. So let's begin. Before we jump into the technical resume tips, let's discuss the general resume advice. Remember, your resume is often the first point of contact between you and your prospective employer. You can view this reality as a hurdle, but we see it as a great opportunity to make yourself stand out from the pile of hundreds of other resumes your recruiter is going to go through. Below, I will cover tips that will apply to any kind of resume, technical or otherwise. This is a great starting point as you begin to compose your technical resume, and it will get you in the right mindset necessary to be successful and begin your job search. So the first tip is make your resume results oriented. The mistake that I made at first when I was applying for jobs, and mistakes that I see many people make, is emphasizing what they did instead of the results they achieved. Let me give you a few examples. If I've built a mobile app using Ruby on Rails and React, instead of saying built an application with Ruby on Rails, HTML and React, the format you should use is build an application with Ruby on Rails and React that ended up scaling to X and Y paying users. In the first part of the bullet point, you state what you did, but then you always end with the impact and the results it had on the project. Now, if you haven't scaled your app to hundreds of users, you can describe your impact like this. To give you another example, you may say, led a project to refactor our server to use technology X that led to an X and Y performance improvement in 6 months. You see where I'm going with that. You can also say, built a messaging app with React Native that resulted in 3 open source contributions to library X. Since a lot of developers use open source, it's always a great sign that you're a good developer if you contribute to open source. So finding ways to tie in your bullet point to the impact and results you made will make you stand out as a candidate. By following this approach, you're emphasizing results-oriented mindset. This will help you highlight the business value that you were able to generate for your product and team. This brings up to tip number 2. Alter your resume to the company and the role. So update your resume for each job you apply. Many people think their work is done as soon as they finish their first draft of their resume. They believe they can simply take this first draft of the document and shoot it out to all of the places they want to be hired at, and they're done. What you want to do is think about the different jobs you're applying to and take into consideration the jobs, the industry, and the position you're looking for. For front-end engineering roles, you might want to customize and highlight technologies you've used on the front end of your projects in order for you to stand out. For back-end jobs, you don't want to include the same technologies you use for the front end. Instead, what you want to highlight are technologies and problems you've solved to tackle back-end problems. And so as you're thinking about the role and you're thinking about the company, you want to make sure that your resume doesn't just reflect all of your experience, but it's customly tailored towards the job and position that you're applying to. Now, with that said, you don't need to custom tailor each of your resumes for the position that you're applying for, but you should be able to tell what the role entails and decide if the experience that you have and your work examples on your resume highlight your biggest strengths for that role. So a good place to start is by looking at the job description in the post, and you must read not just the job description, but you gotta look for specific keywords that company is looking for. What are some of the key skills and competencies that the employer is listing out in the job description? Consider the job description and the listing as something of a cheat sheet that tells you exactly the kind of things you should include on your resume. You can use this tip to avoid bogging down your resume with unnecessary information and irrelevant skills. A relevant and a well thought out resume is essential to stick out of the crowd. So that brings up to tip number 3. Don't let the job description stop you from applying. The irony in what I said earlier is you don't want a job description to stop you from applying for a position. With everything said above, you might not have the exact experience matching the requirements listed on the description. And that's okay. They might say they need someone with 4 years of experience. They hire someone with 2 years of experience if they find the right candidate for the role. They might say they need someone with a computer science degree, but they'll hire a bootcamp graduate who has built projects with JavaScript or other relevant technologies because they are looking for people who know how to use those tools. And they're also looking to hire someone fast, right? So you see where I'm going there. A job description is a guide of what their ideal candidate would look like, and it's your job to tell your story and use that as clues to make them realize that you're the best candidate they can get. So that brings us to tip number 4, don't get silly. While some careers might require a bit of flair on your resume to stand out, like creative jobs or for performing gigs, most resumes benefit from being somewhat boring. After all, you wouldn't write a wedding invitation with a crayon to stand out. The same principles apply here. Be professional and know your audience. That's not to say you shouldn't use engaging language and action words. Rather, it's a simple warning to avoid things like too much color or wacky templates that might make you seem unprofessional. So let's go on to tip number 5. Don't be bound to templates. Tech resume templates are a great way to get started when crafting a resume, but you need to be thoughtful about how you're going to use them. Just because the resume template you've chosen includes a certain section doesn't mean you have to use it. For instance, if your resume template has a heading for awards, but you haven't actually won any awards, you should just remove that section. Or better yet, replace it with something more relevant to you, your skills and experiences. So tip number 6, make sure to proofread your resume. This should go without saying. Always thoroughly proofread your resume and cover letters. There's only a few things that are more embarrassing than finding an error on your resume after handing it out. Or worse, being called out for sloppy work by a prospective employer. Employers want intelligent, attentive, and astute employees, and a resume is a way to demonstrate that you have that attention to detail. And if you're careless or don't pay enough attention, that will certainly not make a good impression on them, and you will not get that call back. To avoid having errors, ask your friends, family, and classmates at coding bootcamps to proofread your resume and to provide you with honest feedback. Another person's perspective can be a huge help. Once you've double and triple checked your resume, you can feel confident when you hand that out to a stranger that it's gonna make you look good. So let's jump to tip number 7. Explore different layouts for your technical resume. Many people unnecessarily hinder their creativity when crafting their technical resumes by only limiting themselves to presenting their experience, education, and work history in chronological order. While this can be an effective way to lay out your resume, leaving chronological order behind might be the best way for you to highlight your best side. If you're looking for ideas, consider using what's known as the functional format. With a functional resume, you don't present things in chronological order at all. Instead, you place the things you most want to highlight at the top regardless of the timing. Functional resumes can direct prospective employers right to the things that make you stand out and leave a lasting impression fast. This is especially true for people who are graduating from a coding bootcamp, and you want to bring project section to the top of your resume. By doing so, you're highlighting your most relevant experience at the top and avoid taking the risk that the recruiter will find the right section of your accomplishments before moving on to the next resume from a different candidate. So let's talk about tip number 8, stick to one page. We know it could be tough to stick to one page, especially if you have lots of experience or work history. And for some, keeping your resume to one page is simply not an option. But with most people, and with some creative editing and formatting, you can fit a whole lot of information onto a single page of your technical resume. So tip number 9, highlight transferable skills. This is especially important for people coming from non-traditional backgrounds. Even if you're applying for a job where you don't have a lot of technical experience, it's always important to make you stand out and shine based on other accomplishments that you've done related to the position. So those accomplishments could be related to non-technical things like leading a team, managing a project, and hitting the goals. For instance, if you're applying for a tech job, but you only have office work experience, you can highlight your ability to work well on a team or your ability to manage time wisely. And these kind of soft skills are just as important to employers as your technical skills. These are the 9 tips on how to create the initial technical draft of your resume. So now let's talk about the items you should leave off your technical resume. In the first section, we covered the 9 tips to help you stand out. In the next section, we'll discuss some of the equally important things to leave off your technical resume. These 2 rules are almost as important as the things you should include on your technical resume, and it will help you avoid making common mistakes and pitfalls to ensure that your prospective employer gets the right idea of what you can offer to their company. So, rule number 1, inappropriate contact info. You may have heard that the first impressions last forever, right? And you can extend that to resumes. Your resume acts as a text-based stand-in to your potential employers, and the hiring manager usually gets their first and often only impression from what they thought about you in the first few seconds. Your resume will get an initial 5 to 10 second scan by the recruiter or the hiring manager, if you're lucky. You don't want to spend that time on a piece of unprofessional contact info. First off, don't include an address, phone number, or email from your current employer as your contact info. Nothing says, I don't care if I get the job, to a hiring manager faster than someone who demonstrates zero respect for that employer and their company. And so what we recommend is using a dull, sober email address, like your first name dot last name at Gmail, if you want to get callbacks. You want to appear professional and appropriate, so avoid using goofy or overly personal email addresses in your resume. Rule number 2, including a relevant work experience on your technical resume. When you're applying for these tech jobs, you need to load up your resume with all sorts of work experience that applies directly to the company and the position that you're looking for. Employers need to know that the people they're interviewing have a baseline level of education that make them worth bringing in for a closer look. They don't have time to waste looking through unnecessary details about your job history if that job history has nothing to do with the position you're looking for. You need to make sure that your employer can easily find your relevant experience, and it's short and to the point. With that said, don't be afraid to include unrelated work if you feel it demonstrates your highest accomplishments. So avoid packing your resume with those sort of jobs just to pad your resume to a few pages. It's not going to be the quantity of the things that you list in your resume, it's going to be the quality. So in the next section, we're going to cover the strategies to create a technical resume. We've already mentioned the 9 tips above and the 2 rules you should not break. But what else can you do to tailor your technical resume to reflect your strengths for a specific position that you're applying for? Now it's time to find out just how to do that. Next, I'll offer some advice on how to create the perfect resume for any type of job in tech. So strategy number 1, use action-oriented words. Similar to how we discussed action and results-oriented approach, if you just finished the coding bootcamp, most of the items in your resume will probably be related to projects you completed in the program. In some cases, you may even have some internships and other experience, which is likely similar to the type of work you were learning or practicing in your bootcamp. But that doesn't mean you can start every sentence with the words like develop, coded, or programmed, because those words won't excite or interest the recruiter. Of course, they want to know more about you, they want to know if you can code, but they also want to know more about what you did. So consider spicing up your resume with content. And instead of saying things like, I was in charge of a project, consider writing, I led a team. Be descriptive, but don't be afraid to use creative and powerful language as long as it accurately reflects your role and the project. The second strategy that's extremely important is to quantify your impact. As mentioned above, when you're describing your projects and experiences, make sure your statements are impact forward. Avoid explaining the grunt work you did, like developed X for Y. Instead, focus on why and how you did it. What was the impact of your work? What results did you achieve? If you're having trouble quantifying the results because the project didn't launch, the audience was small, or the goal wasn't reached, don't worry. So let's move on to strategy number 3. Highlight your technical skills. Prospective employers will look at your resume for 6 seconds to 1 minute to parse through the information that will indicate whether or not you should get a call back. My advice is to create a designated skills section, so when a recruiter is glancing at your resume, they will see it immediately. Consider adding a technical summary near the top of your resume. That way, when your prospective employer can see each technical ability you possess at a glance. As you tailor your resume for each job, one thing you should know is that in today's world, one thing that you should know about this process is that recruiters today also use an applicant tracking software that basically matches keywords that they are looking for with things that you include on your resume. For example, if the job requirement is Ruby on Rails and your resume only says Ruby, then you're taking a chance that the applicant tracking software is not gonna pick up and find your resume as the resume that includes that relevant experience. Another question that you might be asking is, how do you add coding bootcamps to your technical resume? A lot of coding bootcamp students and graduates ask how to include their education on the resume. Should it go inside of the education, experience, or skills sections? Further, how should you format it? And what information should you include? So let's get some answers. First, you have to understand what to include and what to leave out. Hiring managers only have that page of information about you upon which to base their decisions. And so you need to make sure that they get maximum impact when they read your resume. That's why this is so crucial. Including your coding bootcamp experience should actually go into both your work experience and your education history section. As you're doing it, don't add all of your projects to your resume. Mention a few of your best and most impressive projects that a hiring manager is going to be impressed by. You want to make the hiring manager pay attention to your project, and so you definitely want to include links and URLs to the project so they can view the real-life version of your app if you're sending them a digital copy of your resume. I know this is a lot of information to consume all at once, but since you made it this far, I wanted to include a bonuses section. Here, I'm gonna cover the free technical resume templates that we also included in the description of this video below. I know that the job search is not easy, and so as a bonus, I wanted to share our top picks for the most attractive, effective, and memorable technical resume templates that you can get it for free today. Just a piece of advice, once you select your favorite template, Go back through this article and find out exactly how to put your shiny new resume template to a good use for you. Try one of these classy resume templates from Cultivated Culture. Cultivated Culture offers a set of free resume templates that are perfect for tech workers in the job hunt. They provide a level of professionalism and class while still allowing for a dash of color and style to let your personality shine through. If you're looking for web design jobs, you might want to consider the elegant resume template by Raka Caesar. This creative resume template by Raka strikes the ideal balance between aesthetics and information. The ideal creative resume walks a fine line between striking and being a minimalist. You want a resume template that shows off your flair for visuals without becoming overbearing and out of control. It isn't always easy to strike the proper balance. Sometimes see, unfortunately, resumes with clashing colors and overly busy designs. You're equally likely to encounter resumes that don't take any chances and are dull and predictable. This Raka Caesar template is a perfect compromise for designers. For a more classic look, go with these free resume templates by Rio Abraham. If you want to get noticed, you need to expand your template options beyond the usual Microsoft Word selections. You need to choose templates that do a lot of the heavy lifting for you. They need to show off your skills and be memorable, but they cannot be as wild as to turn off the more conservative hiring managers. So Rio Abraham's free resume template is a great resume sample, and it will be a great addition to your template library. With these templates, you can combine sober and informative content with fun and exciting visual presentation. So we included the links to these sample templates and our original blog post on technical resumes and much more in the description below. And finally, the final word on technical resumes. Now that you know the things to include, things to avoid, and other useful technical resume tips, you're ready to start creating your own technical resume. The most important things to remember is you always want to stay true to who you are. You want to highlight your skills and experience and always be honest. If you follow the guidelines and use the technical resume templates, you will land a technical interview and eventually a job. Just remember, you will face a ton of rejection, and that's part of the game. Keep going and check out other videos on how to nail the technical interviews. If you did find this video helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below on your questions on what to include on your technical resume, and let's break in.